Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we are talking about every single book I read in 2024. And then this one was not. I loved it. I have them all laid out under me. I will be going through showing you the books, telling you if I had any specific thoughts about them. Otherwise, I'll just let you know what I rated them, and we'll continue through the stacks and stacks of books I have under me. So let's start with the first book. I am going to be going in order of like what I read them, so some of the series might be a little out of order, but that's just because I didn't read them back to back. So let's get into it. The first book that I finished in 2024 was Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This was my first Hannah Grace book, and it was definitely spicier than I thought, you know, from the cover. I know that they just recently redid the covers I think a few months back, and I think that's because it looks so young adult in this cover, so I think that's why they redid it. I ended up rating this book a 4. It was pretty good. It kept my attention really well. It just didn't, you know, stick out to me any more than like a fun and entertaining book. The last part did kind of throw me through a loop, I will say that. I was not expecting plot twist / like the storyline going that way, but overall 4 out of 5 stars. Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I heard amazing things about this book, and especially if you liked Cassandra Clare books, I heard this book was a really good one to pick up. I did enjoy the magical aspect of it. It just did not shock me, and this is a young adult fantasy book, so definitely didn't have the romantic punch as some of the other like romanticies that I read, but like I said, for the magical aspect and the content in the book, it was good. I would definitely like recommend it if you are new to fantasy. It's just not one of my favorites out of all of the books I've read. I ended up rating it about a 3.75. It couldn't live up to the 4 stars. Then we got into Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I loved Divine Rivals. One of my favorite books, so different in a way with the magical element and the storyline. I hadn't read something like that, so going into Ruthless Vows after that cliffhanger, I was definitely flowing through it really fast. It just was not as good as the first book. That's just my only thought, was that it was a 4 out of 5 stars. It just wasn't that 5-star like Divine Rivals. I finally tried my first Abby Jimenez book. This is the Happily Ever After playlist. I was actually doing my training for my marathons back in February when I was reading this, and I read a lot of it or listened to a lot of it on audiobook. Highly recommend her books. They are so fun, and just the way she writes and portrays characters is just amazing to me. So this was my first of many Abby Jimenez books, and you'll see throughout the year. I ended up rating this a 4 stars. It wasn't that 5 out of 5, but it was definitely close to that because I enjoyed it so much. I then went into The Grace Year by Kim Liggett. I saw Haley Pham talk about this book, and after she kind of described what it was like, I was really interested in picking it up and trying it. After reading the back, I was a little iffy with whether I was going to like it or not, but I ended up really enjoying it. I rated this one also a 4 stars. It's really hard for me to give a book 5 stars, and so I tried to put them in their like own little category and genre, and this one just was not. I couldn't put it at a 3 and I couldn't put it at a 5, so I stuck with a 4. Definitely check this book out, because if you're looking for something different, this is the book and you might end up liking it a lot. And then we got into The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I adore this book. I still do. I love it. I want to reread it actually, because I feel like I forgot a lot of what happened. It's not a thick book, so I flew through it. I ended up rating this about a 4.75. I know. I just don't know why I couldn't give it a 5. There was just something about it, but highly recommend this book. It's probably one of my favorite books that I read this year, if I'm being honest. The 7-Year Slip, super interesting concept, and I wish there was another book. I do. The next few books I'm going to be talking about, I actually did in a 24-hour readathon, which I will put in the iCard for you to check out. I started this, I think, on a Friday, and it carried into Saturday, if I'm remembering correctly. The book that I started with was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I heard about this book from Sarah Caroli, and she really enjoyed it. I had never heard about it until she mentioned it. So I picked it up. It's a fantasy-based book. There's some romance in it. Oh my goodness, did I adore this book. I finished it so quickly. Obviously, it was a 24-hour readathon, so I was just reading and reading and reading, and I could not get enough of it. And luckily, I had the next book to read right after it. So this is a duology. The next one is Two Twisted Crowns. Both of these books, the first one especially got a 5-star. This one, of course, didn't like live up to that first book, but it's definitely close behind with like a 4.5, 4.75. I don't like giving points, like decimals, but I have to. I wish there were more numbers that I could rate books with, because 5 is not enough for me. So anyway, this book was really good. I loved these. Perfect fantasy book if you want to get into it. The concept of the book and the plot line is a little bit different than what I was used to, so that was nice. And there's only 2 books, so it's not a huge commitment, and you still get all of the love and romance and action that you do in the other books. I did really love this main character too. She was just so strong, and like, I love female main characters basically. But these 2 books were the next 2 that I read this year. The next book I read after those 2 in my 24-hour readathon was What Happens After Midnight by K.L. Walther. I did not love this book as much as I wanted to. I feel like the covers of her books always catch my eye. I always want to pick them up because of the covers. This was about a 3.5. Because it was a 24-hour readathon and I had just finished 2 books, I was kind of struggling during this book, and eventually I got through it. I think it was like middle of the night, and I ended up reading it at 3.5. It was entertaining. It was fun. Coming off of like my fantasy high, it just I didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to. Then we got into Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I loved this book. This was such a good book to choose during a 24-hour readathon because I did not want to put it down. Her books are so silly and funny, and the characters are so realistic. I feel like I can relate to a character in every single one of her books. So Yours Truly was definitely a good pick. It was also very emotional. Like, I feel like her books always discuss a very tough topic, or it might be anxiety, something like that, where it's not super hard topic, but it's something that most people can relate to, which I really appreciate. This book, I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars. I feel like I did like this book more than I liked the Happily Ever After playlist. This one just felt more relatable to me than like all the music in the other one, but both of them are good nonetheless. The last book I read in my 24-hour readathon was Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. Heard about this book from Destiny, and I don't know if it's the cover, because covers do matter in my eyes. If it's not a super exciting or pretty cover, I'm just not drawn to it. And this was one that I don't think I would have picked up unless I heard people talking about it and how much they liked it. I really enjoyed this book. It was about a 4 for me, maybe a 4.5. The communication aspect and just Archer in general in this book, I absolutely adored. I loved everything about this book. The plot line, the emotions you feel while you're reading it were just so heart-wrenching, and I'm so glad I read this book this year. I definitely want to read more from her, so if you have any recommendations, let me know. I then got in a series, which was Caraval by Stephanie Garber. Read the first book. It was about a 3.5. It wasn't my favorite. I feel like it was kind of slow, and the build-up, I just needed it a little faster to keep my attention. But the whole entire plot line and magic and kind of carnival aspect of it was very different to me, and I really enjoyed it. And then I got into Legendary, which I liked a lot more. This one I rated a 4 stars. It was very entertaining because you already knew the storyline, you already knew the magic aspect, so it kind of helped to speed up the book a little bit. And then the last book was Finale, and it wasn't that great to me. I feel like it's hard with a trilogy because I feel like it's a slow build-up, then you really love it, and then it's either an amazing end or it's like, oh, that could have been a little better. And I think that's where it was for Finale with me, where I really enjoyed it. But both of the last 2 books got a 4 stars for me. So first one was a 3.5, and then we got 4 stars. I then started Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber, and this I really liked. I think I liked this series a lot more than I liked the Caraval series. This really had me wanting more, and that one was good for the time, but I don't really remember a lot of what happened, so I think that's a sign. And Once Upon a Broken Heart, it's not a super big book, and I also listened to some of this on audiobook, so that helped because I was still doing like my walks and stuff. So Once Upon a Broken Heart got a 4 stars. I really enjoyed this, but I did end up going into a different book after this, so we'll talk about that now. Sorry, I'm sick also, so if my voice just sounds terrible, I really apologize. I still wanted to film this video before the new year, so I apologize. The next book I went into was House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. This book came out while I was reading this one, so I actually put like a pause on it and read this, literally binged it, finished it, and I had a lot of emotions. I have talked about that I have filmed an entire video dedicated to this book, so I will put that in the iCard as well if you want to watch it. It's a long one, but I would say it's definitely worth it. There are spoilers though, so just keep that in mind. But House of Flame and Shadow, very, very highly anticipated book this year, and it fell a little flat in the sense that I didn't love everyone's point of view. There were some moments where I just wanted to forget that person. Like, I don't care. Get me back to the main characters. And so that I didn't love. After I read this book, I definitely had to sit on my rating for a little bit. It was very difficult because then you have everyone else's reactions and opinions coming out, and I didn't want that to outshine my own. So I'm sitting between a 4 and a 5. I have not still made a decision because I did absolutely love this book. I read it so quickly for how big it is. It's like 900 pages. So there's no way I can give it under a 4. I just don't know if it holds that 5 out of 5 star rating. I wanted a little bit more from it, and it didn't give me that. So 4 to 5, somewhere in there, out of 5. Then we got back into Stephanie Garber with The Ballad of Never After. This is my favorite book that she has written, that I have read. The pain I felt in this book is like none other in any of her other books, and it was so good. So good. I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars for The Ballad of Never After. I'm so glad I read this book, and I still like what I remember a lot, which tells me that it was good, because I feel like when you read so many books, you really forget, you know, about other ones, and I truly have. Like, some of these, I'm like, I don't even know what happened. This one I do, and I love it. So 5 stars. I cannot say the same about A Curse for True Love. Again, highly anticipated. It came out this year. It was not good. It just wasn't. I ended up reading A Curse for True Love, a 4 out of 5, so it wasn't terrible, but coming off of this and going into this, it just did not live up to my expectations and the more pain I wanted to feel. So we finished these 2 books. My throat is hurting me so much right now. I then had to pick up Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. The way Sarah talks about these books, if she has not gotten you to read it, I'm so surprised, because I picked it up and I read the first one. Miscommunication is a big no for me. It just bothers me so much in a book. The toxicity, I loved it. I loved it. I loved this book. I read it so fast. I want to read it again. Just give me more, okay? So of course I had to give this book a 5 stars. I loved it. I'm so glad I read it, because you do really hear polar opposite opinions. People either really love it or they really don't. I don't really hear of anyone going like, oh, you know, it's okay. I just adored this book. Go ahead and go read it. It's so entertaining. Then the next 4 books I read was in a video for reading until I find a 5-star read. The first book I picked up, I had on my TBR shelf for so long, so incredibly long. I don't know what intimidated me about this book, but I would just never pick it up. I think I was so worried I wasn't gonna like it, and that's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I have never read a book by her. Here's to say, read the book if you have it. Go ahead, pick it up, because you are going to love it. I will say the first 40% of this book, it was very difficult for me to get into, but once I did, I didn't want to put it down. I just kept reading and reading and reading. I really loved the concept of this book too, and I don't know why I was so intimidated to go into it, but I was crying. I got so attached to the characters more than I thought I was, and because it was kind of hard for me to get into, I ended up rating it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think if it would have picked up a little faster, it probably would have been a higher rating, but read the book if you have it, because I think you're gonna like it. We got into another highly anticipated book, and that was If Only I Had Told Her by Laura Nolan. Don't pick it up. I just was so disappointed. I would have loved the first book so much more now if I didn't read this one, because I feel like this kind of ruined it for me, where I don't even think about the first one anymore because I just think about this one. So disappointing. The point of views, half of it didn't make sense to me. It wasn't needed, and so I liked 50% of the book, didn't like the rest. I read it, but would I have DNF'd it? Probably, if I would have told myself to DNF it. I rated this a 3-star because I got through it. I didn't enjoy it. Don't read it. I feel like read the first one. You'll love it. When we go to Barnes & Noble and my sister's with me, I will always recommend the first book, but I will tell her, do not read the second one. Just don't. Don't waste your time with it. No offense. I really loved the first one. It was like a 4 to 5 star. I can't remember, but this one was not. My first Ali Hazelwood book, Bride. I don't know why I picked this up, if I'm being honest. I know it was like a recent release when I got it, or maybe it had just come out, I'm not sure. But I had heard such back and forth things about Ali Hazelwood, whether people really liked her writing or didn't. I am right in between. After finishing this book, it wasn't anything great. It just also wasn't the worst that I've read, so I feel like I have to give her another chance. I just don't know what book, because now I'm worried I'm not gonna like it. I ended up rating this a 3 stars. I didn't like it as much as I wished I did because it's werewolves and vampires. I don't read a lot of books like that, but there was just something about it that I didn't love it. So 3 stars. We then found my 5-star read, which was The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. I love Lynn Painter. She's one of my favorite authors. This book, I was a little skeptical because it's the Groundhog Day kind of trope where it's like the same day, but it switched up enough that I didn't get bored and I wasn't like, okay, I'm kind of over this. It was enjoyable. The love in this book, I loved, like the romance. I feel like she does romance so well, and it was my 5-star for that video. I really enjoyed this book, and I will always recommend this book if someone wants a romance that's cute, short, and enjoyable. I was actually waiting on my order to come in to start these books because you saw I read the first Magnolia Parks. Well, I had ordered all the books after that, so I was kind of waiting for them to come in. So I finally received them and read Daisy Hates by Jessa Hastings. Oh, I just love all of her books. They are on Kindle, so if you are traveling, it's really nice for that. I was actually traveling at the time that I started this book, so I was able to read it on the plane, which helps instead of like bringing such a big book. I rated this book 4 stars. I love Daisy. She is such a good female character, and yes, 4 stars. That's all I'm gonna say. Then we got into Magnolia Parks The Long Way Home. This one was a step up from the first Daisy Hates book. This one I ended up giving a 4.5. I loved this book, and I also love the covers because if you look, there's like so many things from the Daisy Hates Magnolia Parks world that is in the covers, and I love that. So anyway, 4.5 stars for The Long Way Home. We also got into the book that ruined me, and that was Daisy Hates and the Great Undoing. This book can have my first kid. Go ahead, because I loved this book. 5 stars, 6 stars. The pain, the emotions I felt throughout this book, unmatched. Okay? 6 out of 5 stars. Then we got this big boy because this ended up coming out, Into the Dark by Tessa Hastings. The emotions I felt throughout this entire book, if you think about it, it's the end of like Magnolia Park's world, and so I really felt so deeply for the characters, and the way Jessa wrote it was just so perfect. She discussed topics in there that she just described perfectly, and I really don't have any complaints about this book at all, let alone the series. I loved every single book I read by Tessa Hastings, so I'm so glad that I read this series this year, because I really don't know when I would have if I didn't do it this year. So Into the Dark, 5 out of 5 stars. We took a turn because I read Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. Didn't love this book. If I'm being honest, I can't really remember a lot of what happened. I again heard this from Sarah, actually. She really likes this series, and I really do want to get into the next book. I have not even bought it yet. This one I rated 3 out of 5 stars. It just, compared to other fantasy books and other books that I read in general this year, it just wasn't one that blew me away. Did it keep my attention? Yeah, because I read it, like I finished the book. It just wasn't something that I would think to recommend or to mention in a video because I don't really remember much. I started another duology, and that was These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan. First book by her. I don't even know why I picked these up, if I'm being honest. I saw them in the store. I saw that Stephanie Garber had put like a little mention on there, and it's a young adult fantasy book with romance. So I figured right up my alley, if I want something quick, a fantasy, romantasy kind of read, this was the one. So I picked it up and I enjoyed it way more than I thought, to the point where this book got a 4.5 stars. Highly recommend this book because it's a duology. Again, it's not a huge commitment. So I do feel like people would enjoy the magical aspect as well as the romance and the chemistry within this book. Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller. This is another series that I was seeing, and the covers really did stand out to me. It drew me towards it. There are more books in this series. I only have the first 2, but I wouldn't be against getting the next few books because it is fun and it's funny. I laughed a few times in this book, actually. The female main character in here is so nonchalant. She just doesn't care, and I love that about her. So I rated this one about a 4.5. Then we got into Daughter of the Siren Queen. So I went back to back with these books, and I was already in the storyline and in the world, so I think that helped when I got into this one. I liked it, not as much as the first one, so I ended up rating this a 4 stars. I had to continue my duology of These Hollow Vows and read These Twisted Bonds by Lexi Ryan. Really enjoyed this book. I honestly, more often than not, find that I'm upset when it's just a duology because I love the characters and the storyline so much that I don't want it to end, and that happened in this book. I really got attached to the characters and then it's just over. I rated this book a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed the first one. There's a little bit more emotional depth to that book, I feel like, whereas this one is a lot of action, which is fine. It just was about a 4 out of 5. Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This was my second Hannah Grace book. I did not enjoy this as much as Icebreaker. I don't know what it was about it. I don't know if it was the setting or, you know, the characters. I just don't think I liked it as much. I rated this one a 3 out of 5. First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. Gonna be honest, don't remember this book. Rated it a 3.5 on Goodreads. I would say a 3 since I don't even know what it's about. Maybe even lower. Did not keep any recollection of this book. Wasn't that great. I have other thrillers that I love a lot more. Reckless by Lauren Roberts. Highly anticipated book. Quite underwhelming. Disappointing. I rated this a 3.5 because I was already attached to the characters, right? The world, the characters. But it just was such a lengthy book for the feeling of nothing happened. I feel like nothing happened, and then it left on a cliffhanger, which makes me want to read the next one. But also, how did we get there? Because I feel like nothing happened. 3.5 is, I'm gonna stick with 3.5 because I really did enjoy this book. Reckless. We are now getting into the books that I just recently picked up, November through December. The first book, Funny Story by Emily Henry. Love Emily Henry, one of my favorite authors of all time. This book really helped me to get out of my slump because I could listen to it on audiobook, and I ended up really enjoying it. I rated this about a 4. Could it reach to a 4.5 to 5? Yes, but I'm gonna stay with a 4 just because I love her other book, Happy Place, a lot more. So the characters in this book I adored. I did enjoy it. It's so funny. I did laugh a lot. There were some aspects of the book where I could kind of guess what was going to happen, and then there was other times where I was like, what? I would have never thought that that was going to happen. So Funny Story got a 4 out of 5 this year. Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is the most recent Abby Jimenez book I read. Got a 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I do think this one is tied with yours truly. I love her characters. I don't know how to explain it. I feel like this is more relatable than any other book I read because of the female character and some of the topics that are discussed throughout this book. I feel like I could relate to a lot. So I ended up rating this a 4, but I'm not afraid to give it like a 4.5. I enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend it to people who want to get into romance or a new author. I got into a book that's been on my bookshelf for 8 years, and that was The 1,000th Floor by Katherine McKee. This was on my December TBR. I think that's right. This is my December TBR. And I will be honest, the only reason I really got through this book was it being on audiobook. I feel like I would not have picked it up if I could not listen to it. I ended up rating it a 3 stars, mostly because I don't think I'm going to read the next one. It's fine and it's cool, but there's nothing special about it in my eyes. So I feel like there's other books that I would prioritize over the other book in this, or even this book. Thinking back, I think I would have prioritized a different book. My stacks are getting big and I am getting worried. We have only a couple more books to talk about. Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. This was my first Lucy Score book, and I just actually posted a video about reading this book. This was the whole topic of the video. If you're interested, you can go watch it, spoiler free. You kind of get more in depth of my thoughts. It was okay. I ended up rating it a 3 out of 5 stars. The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni. Another Sarah recommendation, and I loved it. It was so good. So much better than I thought. I flew through it. The ending went crazy, like absolutely bonkers. I'm so glad that I read it, and I really want to read the next one like pronto. I just don't own it. So it'll probably be a book that I buy really soon because I do want to continue this series. This book got a 4 out of 5 stars. Loved it, highly recommend. The last book we have to talk about is Throttled by Lauren Asher. I have read Lauren Asher in the past, but this was my first book in a really long time by her. It was good. It just, I feel like it was kind of slow for me to get into. I don't know why, because I enjoyed it. It just wasn't my favorite book. I ended up rating it a 3 out of 5 stars. I am going to continue the series because I enjoyed the characters. I just think that the relationship, or maybe the two in this book, just weren't my favorite, and that's fine. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. A lot of books, but I'm hoping to get more in next year. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you in my upcoming videos, possibly next year. Bye.